Joining with us, Kátya Kázbekk, writer, translator, and editor-in-chief of arts and culture magazine Supermodo.com. Kátya, thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor, and it's the first time I'm ever doing something with a Greek media. And as someone who is part Greek but not really connected to that part of my culture, I am very honored. So thank you.
Pleasure, pleasure. My first question has to do with the anti-Russian sentiment in USA. Can you talk about the Americans' view on Russia and Russians? The prevailing perception is that the US citizens hold a negative view towards Russia because of Vladimir Putin or because of Russian aggression. What's your opinion?
I think that in general, for this matter, and for others as well, we have to pursue America as two different entities. First one is how the establishment, the political establishment, and all the war hawks and pundits, media want to present the American view, and how the people view everything. So I think that in general, talking to people and just like being there for like 7 years in a row last period, but also prior to that, I have seen people actually taking the care to ask me, like, what should I think of Russia, and like, well, how can you tell me more so that I will be able to shape my perceptions. However, if you go to the mainstream media, if you go to like what the politicians are saying, it's all very hawkish, it's all very negative. It's often times it's going into Orientalist tropes where like the Russians are perceived as like this brutal Asiatic horde that's out for your democracy, and like Putin's policies are often conflated with whatever like the majority of Russians might think, even though for Russians Putin is not any kind of savior, just slightly better than what everyone had with Yeltsin. So, and of course, those, because this is the prevalent narrative in the mainstream media, there's a whole bunch of people who are just following this blindly. But thankfully, like as long as critical thinking is present, people evade those tropes and are showing themselves to be, whether knowingly or not, true internationalists, and like not giving in to this sort of new Cold War.
This Cold War mindset is pushed mainly by, as far as I can understand, by the liberal media. We have this image of Joe Biden after the Geneva meeting with Putin, merely attacked by the liberal media, especially CNN, because he was too soft on Russia. So I think I would like to hear your point of view. I think that the liberal establishment is far more aggressive than the traditional conservatives on this issue. Maybe because of the elections in 2016 and the whole narrative of stolen elections, etc.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that this warmongering language is more prevalent on the liberal side rather than the conservative side, and it sometimes becomes very weird in how like some conservative pundits, who are by no means actual friends of like the Russian people in general, or would care if we live or die, they are often lauded as, not lauded, but critiqued as Kremlin bots, etc. And the Russiagate, the whole concept of it, which began with the election of Donald Trump as a way to explain why people would pick him over Hillary Clinton, which is not that much of a mystery, because it's like when you have two equally bad candidates, you might just pick one over the other who has not had such a bad run as in prior office. So, but it just so many lies have been told from the liberal side. So many things have been convoluted. And everyone who was trying to push against those narratives has been smeared relentlessly in ways that had cost them their careers, or just kind of put the label of Kremlin bot next to their names. It's just incredible. And it's because it's kind of just this is something that really bothers me too in this and in many other aspects, is that nobody ever cares about Russians or Ukrainians for that matter, because I'm also part Ukrainian, and so this is not something that's a foreign issue to me as well. But it's just that it's the infighting between the establishment in the US, for which they use everything that's just useful. And sometimes it's China, sometimes it's Russia, but it's just so dehumanizing and so othering, because it's like they're talking about concerns for like things like democracy and liberty, but it all is of course void and vapid, because in essence everyone is only caring about their power and trying to establish as much power as they can by smearing the rest and creating those myths about hacked elections, which is also really funny, because if you're trying to paint your country as this so shining example of democracy on earth, then perhaps saying that it can be just stolen away so brutally by this like scheming people is just bizarre and weird and doesn't make any sense.
Let me come to the Russian side. What's the current political climate in Russia? Because I hear the perception from some friends or analysts that the Russian society is deeply apolitical. That this is the greatest achievement of Putin, or maybe all the Russia in the 20th century, that maybe they're all, Putin is not a miracle worker or a great leader, but you have a deeply apolitical society. What's your opinion on this? What's the current climate in Russia when it comes to Ukraine or USA?
I think that the Russian people, and I guess this applies a lot to the whole post-Soviet sphere as well. If we talk about the majority, not the weaponized minorities such as like nationalists, for instance, in Ukraine or let's say Georgia, I think that the people have been so stunned and so downtrodden by the events of the past 30 years, especially like the decade following the collapse of the Soviet Union, when everything was just in such a turmoil, when the people were suffering so much, when death rates went through the roof, when there were so many suicides, when people were losing their livelihoods, when the industry was collapsing, when everything was privatized, and it was just became a neoliberal hellscape. So the suffering was so immense that the following 20 years, when everything was just like stabilizing a bit, and stability has been known as the key defining term of Putin's era of the last 20 years, 22 years, I guess, in which he has been either the president or prime minister. That this stability, it's been welcome as a sort of just kind of like at least something, as opposed to the absolute horrors that came before. So people are still reluctant to get into political action on a larger scale, although I feel like this is going to pass quite quickly, because of course
there's a new generation.
there's a new generation, and there's also a lot of inequality as well. And I feel like it's everything is going to the point where even though like this stability is not enough anymore. So and also with the new generation, it manifests in different ways. So for some in the newer generation, it's like because there's also an increase in life quality. So while like inequality is vast, but like you also have like some sort of like not exactly a middle class, but like the people who are living with this idea that if they come to Moscow, because everyone comes to Moscow, like it's a very centralized
it's the
economy, like everything.
The 50% of the GDP, I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So, and it's just and all the jobs are here, and like you have to be here to like achieve something in life in this like sense of free market, whatever. So everyone is just like trying to get a piece of the pie, which they probably will not, but like or die trying. So at this point, a lot of the people are just like going at it from a different point of view, where they think that like a freer market will liberate them instead of like equality and socialism. So it will still take some time before this changing shifts in the moods of people will come to the right conclusions, I feel like. But it's also I think it's not entirely hopeless, also because of the fact that like everything that's at least remotely good that we have here is the remnant of the Soviet system, like as such as socialized healthcare, of course, even though it has been privatized in parts lately, and it's very much not as good as it used to be, and it also you have to rely on bribes. And for instance, if we compare it to Belarus, which had retained the healthcare system of the Soviet Union without many changes, and which is by statements of my friends, for instance, is just perfect and absolutely free for you and magnificent. In Russia, it's worse, but still and so the people are viewing this Soviet legacy in very positive terms in different age groups, not only those who had witnessed it or witnessed like a small part of it, such as myself, as I was 5 when it was dissolved, but also younger generations. However, I think the issue here is that there's still a separation between realizing the goods of Soviet era and the fact that it's socialism that built it. So it will still take a lot of time and organizing to kind of bridge the gap between those two things and kind of awaken the entirety of the population from this political slumber. And it also, I guess, depends on the fact, as anywhere in the world, actually, especially like in the imperial core and like the semi-periphery that we have in Russia or say Greece, where you like the governments are throwing bones to the people so that like they can keep a certain level of comfortable living like in the big cities, so that as they don't revolt and like it's a little easier to the hardships are for some part of the society are not as dire as they were, say, in prior to 1905 and 1917, even though I would say that to me the more I see things in Russia right now after having returned here, even though I am still between Moscow and the US, but I hadn't been able to be in Russia, but now I live between the two. So the more I see again, and the more I read about the world in the beginning of the 20th century, the more similarities I see, except for the fact that it's way more digital and shiny and kind of in some ways more advanced than places in Europe or the US. At the same time, there's a lot of like those gaps between how people live as they used to be in the beginning of the 20th century.
The majority of the Russians, what view tend to have about the US, USA, and the West generally?
I think I would need to double check with the some service that had been done, but I think in general it tends to be like there are negative views and about half of the people, I think, but I would not be able to vouch for that. I haven't seen those surveys for a long time, so I can't recall exactly.
My perception is that they tend to be more negative than 15 years ago because of the 2014, the sanctions, the US mania with the Russia. Let me come to Belarus, because you talked about Belarus. 1 year ago, you wrote an article with Alexei Sakhnin called Why the Uprising in Belarus Failed. I would like to hear your view on the issue, because in Greece and Europe generally, the mainstream narrative is that the brutality of Lukashenko, and only the brutality, it's the only factor of success.
Interesting. I actually think that in viewing the way the events of in Belarus turned out, a lot of the Western media tend to pathologize what's happening. Like in no way am I saying that there were no trespasses from the special forces. I mean, he is their president, he's giving them orders, they're doing their job. We can condemn that for as those opposing like police serving as enforcers of the regime, but it is logically correct. So as someone who has been living in the US for so many years lately, I have seen the same brutality exercised by the police upon the people who are seen as opposing the regime. For instance, during the Black Lives Matter protests, or just
Yellow Jackets in France.
The Yellow Jackets, for instance, yeah, it's like I mean, just pretty much anywhere. It's just that they're not publicized as much, and they are not put in the spotlight as precisely as what was happening surrounding the protests in Belarus. So I think that it's just it's the same issue that comes up with whenever the West is becoming concerned with the liberties of people in the countries that are subservient or not as much to them, is that all the violence is just propelled to be something completely out of the ordinary, and everything else is like it's just shown as something that's out of the ordinary. But at the same time, they have the same things happening in their backyards. They have political prisoners who are just have been locked up forever, and it's just you have them in Greece, we have them in the US, we have Julian Assange, the biggest political prisoner of all,
Guantanamo.
Who is
Guantanamo.
Yeah, and Guantanamo, of course, yeah, which has never ceased to exist despite the promises made. So it's like it's all there, but at the same time, this is shown as something that's just, oh well, it's we're doing this for democracy. But when you see Lukashenko trying to protect his rule and trying to quell the protests, which he sees as opposing to the integrity of his country, then this is shown as pathological, although I do not see any difference, because whoever is in power is protecting their power, and it's the issue is whether you agree with them or not.
What we see in the Western media when it comes to Lukashenko or Putin or those leaders is the total absence of the social factors in their analysis. There are no social divisions. There is one society totally working for democracy, and one brutal dictator with some gunmen. It's all like a Hollywood movie. Bad and good.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though like I see some things that are working well in Belarus, I am not a fan of Lukashenko at all. And I see that it's just, yeah, it's they're showing the people who think that he's the worst thing in the world, and it's just like a small amount of people, if you like, according to, like, even by like the most over sympathetic to the opposition standards, it would at least be half of the country still upholding it. That's kind of like the way we counted it for the Jacobin article you said about Belarus. Or like in Russia, like Putin's ratings are still like of approval are even by the surveys conducted by this Levada Center, which is a survey agency that has been deemed foreign agent by the Russian government. So it's like not at all friendly. Like they consistently show that he's the most popular figure, and everyone else is trailing behind. So there's this, and there's also the fact that like with the majority of those protests that we see, it's always like they center on a particular group of people who are usually big city dwellers. They're interested in like their own concept of democracy, which is not necessarily one that's shared by the majority. They kind of like have one or a couple of leaders that they like, and they talk about the changing of the regimes and like the necessary of like changing governments. But it's never goes into like class issues, even though I feel like the liberal oppositions, the national liberal oppositions, I would actually say, have caught on to the social factors, and so they have been talking about them more. But in Belarus, for instance, this was especially evident that like the opposition tried to reach out to the workers, like in their own way, like not just like by, as I don't know, Lenin would reach out to workers, but they tried to reach out to them and like have strikes, and there were some, but just like so insignificant that it's like it doesn't become like a workers' movement or anything at all, because just demographically, it's mostly like people who are better off, who are just they're discontent with whatever is happening, and whether it's in Belarus, in Russia, or anywhere else, it's not with the inequality as much. It's just like things that are they don't feel like they have enough of, such as freedom of expression or something like that, which is very, very like it's those are signifiers that are if you go deep into them, there's meaning to them, but nobody ever does that. So it becomes all of like very superficial words that everyone is saying, like, oh, we don't have freedom of speech in Russia, or we don't have freedom of speech in Belarus, but do you conclusively have it in the West as much? Because essentially, like again, as with many other issues, they're all kind of similar. Here, there, everywhere. Because like if you're against the powers that be, then you will be censored and quelled, because that's how any regime, whether you consider it to be the world's greatest democracy or an authoritarian nightmare, by the words of the Western press, that's how the regime just perpetuates itself and how it stays in power to, yeah.
So the liberals in Russia or Belarus or in those countries tend to focus on post-materialist arguments,
Absolutely,
totally separated from the working class. But I tend to ask myself, so I will ask you too, what's the alternative for the radical left in those countries? Because there is a hard task. You have to defend Russia from the perspective that is generated by the West, the Western media, a tiny part of the left which says that Russia is exactly the same with the US, is an imperialist country, and on the other side you have to ask for more democracy. I think this is a hard task for the radical left in those countries. What's your opinion on this?
Yeah, and I think that it's true what you're saying, and we can even see in the histories of like the actually existing socialist regimes that socialism as it existed was conducted very differently. For instance, when I look at the Soviet Union and say Yugoslavia, like the way they approached such issues, especially like if we take approximately the same time frames, was different. It's for instance, something that is close to my field of research is like underground music, how it worked in Yugoslavia and how it worked in the Soviet Union, which is pretty much a manifestation of the popular discontent. In Yugoslavia, it was allowed and it was not fought as much as it was in the Soviet Union. However, like the results that we have are essentially the same. So I don't know if that's, but that's definitely something that we need to think about because it's absolutely not within bounds of human sanity to imagine that the people that live today, that are alive today, are just gonna be operating throughout the same social modes that had led them to build the socialisms that existed before us. But it's and at the same time, we also have already at this point, especially like you in Greece, I think have this experience of that siding too much with the liberals just doesn't lead us to any conclusive place, and it will just lead us to betrayal and kind of the abandonment of the left project for the sake of some kind of middling ground that is only useful for those who were not as bad off previously, but is of no use for those who are having the worst of it. So I think that we need to just account for the newly existing factors, and I think that it's definitely necessary to not be conservatives socially. Like you can't just try to hope for any sort of left project to kick off the ground unless you account for the fact that there are, I don't know, queer people, because even though like identity politics are really hindering the left politics, because they're kind of like pulling it away from class solidarity. Without awareness of them, we are just going to abandon all the handling of those issues to people from the like ultra-right spectrum, who are for instance in Russia you have like those American evangelist organizations who are sponsoring like severely homophobic organizations and actions and
I think investing in social conservatism was not a clever way for the left to how to put it, to come in terms with the working class. I think that's a nightmare because thinking that you share a social conservatives with the working class tend to regenerate their worst aspects.
Absolutely, yeah, and you can't really have that.
So let me come to your magazine, Supermodel. Can you provide us some context about your magazine and your recent book, which is called The Little Foxes Took Up Matches, published by Tin House? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, so Supermodel is it's a project that I've been working on for like the last I can actually say how many, like 4 years or something. But it's it was funny because when I was like, for some of my opinions, I was being smeared online. People were saying that I receive like money from the Russian government to do it, so that I can convert people with my ideas and everything. And it was just I was like, well, I should have thought of that, because it's basically a project that me and my husband have started off on our own. We have not spent a dime on it, except for, like, I don't know, tickets to the movies, or like books that to review. And it's something that's constantly evolving, and I hope that one day it will actually have enough content so as to serve a sort of encyclopedia of things that are useful from any kind of country in the world, or territory, or like ethnicity, or nation, or just kind of any sort of like, for instance, larger entity, sort of like, I don't know, about like women creators from like Africa or something like that. So that if someone is interested in something like that, for instance, this, or like the films from Cuba, or books from Argentina, or like Chinese comics, or
It's a project
music
with
from
an internationalist perspective.
Yeah, absolutely, because I feel like that's something
You
that
have
has
posted
always
Yorgos
bothered me.
Nelaras. I've saw it.
Okay. I became like obsessed with this idea, because I realized that especially in the West, because it's an English language project, because unfortunately I also like I can't really like write it in all of the other languages, and we don't have any means to like pay people to do it outside, but only like people who sometimes volunteer. That it's like in the English language, you always hear about films from somewhere that are vetted by the like the general media narrative about this place. Like if you're going to see films from China, you will likely only see films that are critical of the Chinese government, and not because that's how, like, if you want to like win an Oscar and go to a film festival somewhere in the West, that's, you have to pass this margin. So sometimes there are gems that still pass, but in general, it's just like very politicized. So I wanted to kind of make some kind of like a way to access art that exists. But of course, there are pitfalls, because I can't, even if I find the books that exist and that show any country the way it really is, and not from like the Western perspective, I can't translate it. So it becomes like a little funny, but at the same time, still, at least the ability to know that there are these books that are on the subject of like Ethiopia, there and that are not like just some white dude from New York who went to Ethiopia and wrote about how everyone lives in poverty, and how people are not civilized, which is something that like this cultural imperialism still is very much alive. And but actually people from Ethiopia who are talking about their experiences. So this is like a very lofty thing, and but I hope that as I try to find some kind of a lot of more people who share this idea with me, and I've already found some, so we'll be working on like having people from particular regions talk about their culture, so which will be much easier than just like me trying to talk about everyone else, because it's also like I don't know enough.
And
so
what about
hopefully
your
it will
book?
be some... Yeah, and my book is it's coming out in April 5th. It's about a boy growing up in post-Soviet Russia, who just like sees everything collapse, the world as he knew it, and his family is suffering greatly because like they lose their jobs in factories. His cousin comes back from the war severely damaged because his platoon mates have been murdered. The war, I mean, is the first Chechen war, and the boy is growing up discovering that maybe he's not a boy, but maybe he wants to dress up as a girl once or twice. So it's like it becomes kind of like a way to for him to figure out his identity, which is like not fixed. At the same time, figuring out the landscape around him, where there's so many homeless people who have to define their lives in some way that is not possible because the whole world is uprooted. And I hope that this novel will be one of those that tells the people who usually view, so like the Western readers especially, who usually view like the post-Soviet Russia as a sort of liberation of like people from an oppressive regime, that it wasn't all rosy. It was actually like, yeah, you had the McDonald's, but like there were actually people who were begging for money by the entrance of this McDonald's, like old ladies, because their pensions were suddenly not enough, because they lost everything they had worked for previously, because they were duped, because there were financial pyramids and stuff like that. So and I hope that at least I will be able to open up a few perspectives on post-Soviet Russia and help people better understand the Russia of today than they do currently.
We will read your book, and of course, Supermodo. It's a great work. Today with us, Kátya Kázbekk, writer, translator, editor-in-chief of arts and culture magazine Supermodo.com, writer of Little Foxes to Cup Matches. Thank you very much for our conversation.
Oh, thank you so much, Vagelis. Thank you.